Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. The JAMODI podcast is powered by Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer for high-quality, innovative scoring tables and LED video display boards that help coaches and schools bring more excitement to fans, create huge fundraising opportunities, and make their jobs easier. Visit sidelineinteractive.com to check out their amazing products. I love the fact that story that you talked about in the 90s of having those teams that continued to get far in playoffs, but they weren't able to take that next step. And that was in the 90s, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It was the late 90s and 2001. We went 34-2 in 2001. We beat Hobbs in the Hobbs tournament. They had Ronald Ross that played at Tech. They had a 36-game winning streak. You don't win in Hobbs. Most people have been to Hobbs, New Mexico, but it's not as big now as it was. But, there's so many Tech players. Tony Benford's, coach at TCU right now with North Texas. Tony Benford, he was Hobbs, all those Hobbs guys. So we went over there and won, and Hereford was in our district, and we beat Hereford both times. And then we beat Fort Worth Dunbar in the semifinals. They were number one in the state, and they had a guy named Lance Jackson. Stephen Thomas played at UTA. They were really good, and we beat them in the semifinals. And the next day we played Hereford, and they beat us. And that was probably as painful a loss as we've ever had. And that was the fourth straight year we'd gotten beat in the regional finals. So, it really challenges you why you're in this business when you do that and you put so much into it, and you see kids bawling and saying, we dreamed and it couldn't, there's a lot of things. Some of those same kids, Matt, the guy that passed away, was one of those players, and he became a great coach. And the other guys, there was three of those guys that were down in San Antonio. Two of them, one of them's a professor at A&M, one of them's a banker in Houston, and they all, it's what makes it fun. The losses, when you put me down, I hope they're not going to say Broadhurst had so many wins and this is why he was a good guy. They're going to, hopefully say, well, he was nice to people, or something like that. That's hopefully what we're all doing this for. And I think, like I said, 95% of coaches are in it that way. So
that's been my experience, is that majority of guys are not in this for the money and are in it to help kids. But then the fun part is that we get to work with kids and see them improve. But then, as competitive people, we still get to compete. I'll never forget. Wow, I haven't thought about this story in a long time. Coach Bliss, we're at Kansas playing, and halftime, I mean, we weren't nearly as good as Kansas was that year, and we were young, but we were in the game, Coach. And halftime, he comes in, he's fiery. And, man, he slams the locker with his hand. And it wasn't out of anger. He was so pumped up. His hand's shaking because of what he's just done to it. But then as we're walking out, he kind of is next to me. He goes, Matt, this is how I still get to compete.
Yeah.
And I thought, I mean, that's it. So, but when your teams and players go through those hard times, what do you do to kind of build that confidence back up? Or even throughout the season, when you see their confidence going up and down, how do you help build it?
Well, I think, like after a loss, after we lose a game, I'll go in there, and I don't believe that you sit in there and talk for the guys that keep them for 20 minutes to 30 minutes. I think Danny Henderson, one of my good friends, told me this a few years ago. After 2 minutes, Broadhurst, they're not listening to you anyway. So just shut it down, and I've really tried to work on that. Now they'll listen to some stories, but as far as me just chewing them out, it doesn't, I don't think that's really the answer. I think something that we try to do after a loss is say, here's one or two things, and then ask the players, hey, tell me 2 things we did good tonight, and then tell me 2 things we need to work on tonight, after tonight's game. And then we try to focus on that. Well, these 2 things, and we make the kids tell us, these are 2 things. Even though we lost, look at what we did in rebounding, coach. We won the rebounding battle, or whatever. And then they'll tell you, turnovers, or we didn't shoot it that well, or we weren't ready, or whatever. And so we're trying to fix that immediately with them having input, not just me and they're screaming at them, telling them you didn't do this, you didn't do that. I think it's better if you kind of involve them in that process.
I love that. And that's a valuable tool. Great reminder by Danny Henderson. I had the pleasure of getting to have one of these hoops talks with him. Guys like you and him, when I'm sitting there listening, I just feel completely unqualified to be on the call. But no, that's a great reminder. And a guy named Tyler Costin, who is just a really, his basketball mind is incredible. I was able to meet him through PGC, and his advice was to completely do away with post-game talks for the very reasons that you said. You bring them together, you say thank you, you break, and let them go. He says let them go eat pizza because they're not listening. But I do love that idea of asking them what were 2 good things that they did well, get them focused on the positives, and then ask them 2 things. What those questions do, though, assuming it's not effort, right? Because if effort's the problem, well, then you don't have a basketball problem as much as a culture problem. And that culture problem really needed to happen months and months ago. And so you're in a tough spot then. But you take the emotion out of a loss with here's a game plan. And guys, because if we're just on a process to keep improving every day, this is just the next step. What can we do better? Here it is. I love you. Let's get out of here. And that's a great way to look at it, Coach.
Well, thanks. Yeah. It's been good. We've gained more out of that than we have me in there. And, as a younger coach, I think I'd go in there and Dave Bliss hit the chalkboard in my hand for the wrong reason. What are you guys doing? And that Danny's very intelligent, great coach. I think one of the greatest coaches in our sport. And when he talks to me, I listen. So that's helped me a little bit. Now the kids, don't go show this to the kids because they'll say, "Coach, you still talk too long."
That's a lie.
But I really try to keep it in 2 minutes, man.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.